Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Camp Grizzly from Ameritrash Games. You can find this game at ameritrashgames.com. They wanted me to mention that. So, what this game is, it's mostly cooperative, but kind of semi-cooperative. I'll talk about that in my final thoughts. You and the other players are counselors at the titular Camp Grizzly, and there is a maniac in a bear mask called Otis who is stalking you and trying to kill all of you. So this game is really an ode to slasher movies. You are trying to work together, use your special abilities, and go through one of multiple different end game scenarios that will hopefully put an end to Otis's reign of terror in one way or another, or you're all going to get killed. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Camp Grizzly. This is a cooperative game for up to 6 players. The goal is to survive. There is this crazy madman named Otis. You have his little character card down here that has his stats. His stock rating is how fast he's going to be chasing the campers. Attack is what die he gets to roll of the 4 different types of dice when he attacks, and how much damage he actually deals if he's successful. But this crazy guy, Otis, who is a something or other, wearing a bear mask, is stalking all of the camp counselors and the tiny campers who are underneath their care, and you are those campers, and you're trying to survive through several different scenarios. So here's the different campers, all sort of the, I guess, stereotypes of different campers. You have like some of the athletic guys, the thoughtful artist, you have the cheerleader, you've got the survivalist camp counselors, the loner, Jody, and of course the jock, Kevin. Each of you is going to have control of one of these campers, and you all have different special abilities. So, for instance, Sherry never gets lost on the nature trails, and the Scream Queen, Tracy, whenever Otis stalks, you may have lure him in your direction. So you'll all have control of these different people, and what you're ultimately trying to do is have one of the final encounters, which there's going to be these, there's going to be these different decks. There's like 2 or 3 cards in each one of these. The barn, the ranger tower, the van, and the boat. Each one of them has different objectives listed on them, like car keys or fuel or a battery. And if you can get that set of objectives and move towards one of those red arrows on the board, so for instance, if you go to this area with the objectives, between you or several campers, like you'll have the barn finale if you go here, or you'll have the van finale if you go here, and so on. You'll take the top card off one of those stacks, and that will be the final showdown with Otis. Now, it's also possible that Otis has a body count track down here at the bottom of the board. In fact, on this setup, which is the normal difficulty setup, it starts off at 1, hence the reason that his stock starts off at 2, because as he goes up in body count value, his attack, damage, and stock go up. If it ever gets all the way up to 13, which has a skull on it, which you know is never good, then it is impossible for the campers to win with one of the normal objective cards. Instead, they have to go to the center of camp where they start off with in the game and have a final showdown with Otis, which is just simply a knockdown, drag-out brawl. And if they can beat him there, then they'll win. Otherwise, or if they fail any of the normal objective cards, then they will all lose. That's how you're going to lose the game. So let me show you a couple of examples of those objective cards just so you know. And these are all going to be different for every single objective card. You have ones like the bait, and in this one, you're actually luring Otis in. And you'll go through these different things. So for instance, setting the trap, choose a counselor to become the bait, one of the counselors that's involved in this objective. In other words, not every counselor has to go off the board where one of those red arrows are. Rather, some of the counselors may stay back in camp, and some of them may just participate. And if you fail on the objective, then it's possible for the counselors back that are still in camp to win the game by doing another one. But this one, unless the bait is the final living counselor or a virgin, he or she is horrified. Spring the trap, Otis strikes the bait alone. Otis strikes is when he engages in combat, which we'll get back to in a few minutes. And then so on and so forth. At the end here, you lure them into the trap. Counselors can help them out by discarding items, and then if you can defeat them, you defeat them. If not, the bait escapes, and then someone else has to be the bait. Or if you win, the burning barn collapses on Otis. That is the end? Question mark. You may also go. That was for a barn objective. This is one of the ranger tower objectives, radio silence. So outrun Otis, call for help, and then just hold out. And there's all different dice rolls and things that you can do in order to influence it. This one actually has 2 possible endings. Either only the counselors in the tower survive, the others are never heard from again, or help arrives, all counselors in the tower and in the camp survive the night. And I won't show you the other ones just to give you a little bit of spoiler free there in case you do end up playing the game. Now, sprinkled throughout the board are going to be objective tokens, which will have not just some of the objectives you'll need for the different scenarios, but will also be things like Otis strikes, so it can be dangerous things, or they can just be, you can find campers and other random objects, or draw cards and so forth. Some of the cabins are locked. In order to get through them, you're going to need to find the keys, which, by the way, which will in this scenario will actually start on the board, but also double as one of the objective tokens as well. Lastly, for setup, each player is going to start off with survival cards. In fact, one of the campers will start off with an extra survival card as well. These are things that are just going to help you out during the course of the game. So we'll just take a look at a few of these as an example. You have cards like Skedaddle, which says when Otis strikes, safely move a counselor from that fight to your space. So you can use these when they apply. Crawl Space, play at any time to remove your counselor pawn from the board and place it on this card. Otis cannot stalk or attack you while you are in the crawl space. At the beginning of your next turn, return your counselor pawn to a random nature trail and discard Crawl Space. We Thought You Were Dead. This is one of my favorite thematic cards. Play at any time. You choose. A dead counselor returns to play with 1 injury at the campfire, or a dead camper returns to your care. In either case, reduce the body count accordingly. And here's the Virgin card. Permanent. Draw 1 less card when tempting fate, which is something that happens during the game. You receive +1 to all your rolls during the finale. When fooling around, roll a d6. 4 through 6, cancel the fooling around activity. 1 through 2, discard Virgin. Now, I'm going to run you through how a turn works, but real quick, let's take a closer look at one of the character cards. Now, over here on the side is the health and move of the character. As you take damage, your movement is adjusted. So it starts off at a 3 for Tracy here, and then it goes down to 2, but you'll see that when it gets down to where you're really, really hurt, it increases again because you're now really freaking out and moving quickly to run away from Otis. But if it gets down to here, you are dead and eliminated from the game, unless, of course, you draw that one particular survival card. Then over here you have the panic stat. Now, the panic stat is whenever you lose a fight with Otis, or you choose just to panic willingly and not fight him at all when he strikes. In that case, you have to run away that many spaces. So let's run you through a turn. The first thing that you'll decide who's going to go first, and you're going to go in clockwise order. Every player is going to get a turn before you get to the Otis stalking action. So the first thing you can do is move. You're not required to move, but you can move your full movement. By the way, Otis's token starts here in the tool shed, so he is on the map. If you win a fight against Otis, or some other special card makes it happen, then he'll get removed from the board, and if that happens, when he comes back on the board, he'll start off on one of the nature trails. But anyways, when it's your turn, you can move a number of spaces equal to whatever your current movement rate is, moving through different spaces and cabins, remembering that you cannot move into locked spaces unless you have the keys. Now also, the nature trails, which are these numbered segments here, you can move on those spaces. However, if you're anyone except for Sherry, who never can get in danger of being lost on those trails, you have to roll a d6. If you roll a 5 or a 6, you're fine. You can move from one point to the next point. If you roll anything else, you are lost in the woods. And on future turns, you're going to have to roll, I think, either a 4, 5, or 6, or a 5 and 6 just to escape from the woods, but you'll lose a turn, essentially. You can use your move action for some other things. So, for instance, if I was in a cabin and was got through that lock because I had keys, I'd be able to pick up one of the objective tokens by using one of my movement actions. So for instance, this is rope, and I'll be able to stow that in my backpack, and I'll have access to that for one of the particular objectives. I could also use that to pick up the keys as well if one of the campers was in that space. Once you finish taking your move action in one form or another, then it is the cabin draw phase. This is where you're going to take the top card off of the cabin deck. And these are quite a bit different than the survival cards. Here I'll show you a few examples. Many of the cards in this deck are campers. These are the little kids that you as counselors are in control of, I guess. And they all have different special abilities. Sometimes they have things that can help you. Sometimes they are just a hindrance. So Dawn here, at any time, Dawn can run stuff from your space to a counselor at any other space. However, you have to roll a d4, and if you roll a 1, he didn't make it. He runs into something, maybe a guy wearing a bear mask. You just never can tell out in the woods, and then the body count goes up. Now, Dawn, D-A-W-N, is Dawn's identical twin, or a twin brother, and with the two, she's basically just a hindrance. If both of them are in your care, then everything's fine, but if not, if you only have the girl Dawn, then your movement is reduced by 1, unless you use both hands to carry her. But if you ever get horrified, you're forced to discard Dawn because she gets captured by Otis, and you lose body count. It's a very cute picture. She's got an inhaler there. Then you have Angela, who's very sick and twisted. She has a knife and can actually fight Otis just like the counselors can on her own. Poor Lunchbox. When Otis strikes, you can run 2 spaces away if you have Lunchbox, but Lunchbox, unfortunately, is not so lucky. Then inside the cabin deck, you have Otis Strikes. Now, I guess I'll just go ahead and explain how Otis Strikes works right now. And this is not the only thing that'll make Otis Strikes. Several other cabin cards and maybe even tokens that you find on the board will make this happen. When Otis strikes, Otis will immediately move to that cabin and or perhaps even the campsite, and every counselor and every cameo that is there is in danger of being killed. Cameos, by the way, are ancillary characters who you may come across by drawing cards from the cabin deck. They're usually just a hindrance to you. They'll be put out on the board, and if you ever run into their space, they might like steal your items or hold you up and things like that. But both counselors and cameos are in danger of being killed whenever Otis strikes. Every counselor that's there has to fight until Otis is defeated, or until every character either willingly panics and runs away, or until they all are forced to panic because they lose the fight. But essentially, you're going to roll the die for Otis wherever his attack track currently is, and then you're going to roll for whatever counselor is currently fighting, whatever dice that they have from the special items that they've grabbed, baseball bats, whatever it might be. Whoever comes out with the higher roll and Otis wins ties is going to be the winner. And if it's Otis, he's removed from the board temporarily. He'll come back later. If it is the campers, then they're good to go. They don't have to do anything. So that's an Otis Strikes card. Let's look at some of the other ones that you might come across. There are items that you can equip, like the acoustic guitar, which is going to increase your combat damage, and it'll tell you down here whether you have to hold it in one hand or 2 hands. They also have special abilities. So for instance, Kumbaya. While equipped, Otis will stalk you. When Otis Strikes is drawn, you are attacked. Discard if used to win a fight. That means it'll focus on you. The chainsaw is a gas guzzler if you roll a 1, but it's a d10. If you roll a 1 with the chainsaw, your attack fails and the chainsaw is discarded. You have sneakers. When equipped, you may move 1 additional space during your move phase. Timmy Teddy. When Otis strikes your cabin, discard Timmy Teddy to cancel his attack. Then all counselors in all locations may immediately move 2 spaces. So the game kind of tells bits of the backstory here. You have Bandage. Any heal 2 injuries may be used on yourself and or another counselor in your cabin, and then discard it. Demasked. Otis strikes. Every counselor in this cabin is horrified, which is a special condition. Through the window, every counselor in this cabin receives 1 injury from shattering glass. Then you are moved to the campfire where Otis strikes, and a question mark token appears at Morris's office. Chiseled features. Otis strikes. The first counselor in the panic in this fight is disfigured. Anyone crossing paths with you is horrified. Discard after healing an injury. Plot points like fire. You place a fire token on this space. Any counselor that crosses paths with the fire must roll a d4. On a roll of 1 or 2, you're burned and receive an injury. Skinny dipping. Move to the swimming area and pick a counselor to join you. You both unequip your items and weapons before going for a quick swim. You begin fooling around, which leads to tempting fate, which means you have to draw more cards from the cabin deck. Here are examples of a couple of cards that will bring out the cameos. Karen's boyfriend and Detective Hat-On. If Otis crosses paths with either of them, they will be killed, in addition to hindering your efforts if you cross paths with them. You'll have a final chance at the end of your turn after drawing your requisite cabin card to equip items or toss items or trade items with other players. And then, after every player has had their turn in order, then it is time for Otis's turn. And Otis is going to stalk. Looking at his stalk stat, he's going to move that many number of spaces if he's actually on the board. Now, if he's off the board, then he comes out on the board on one of the nature trails. That's what the numbers mean. You're going to roll the d10 and see where he's going to start off at. Then he's going to start moving towards the closest camper, and there's a way to determine which one he goes after based on if there's a tie, and so on and so forth. If he crosses paths with one of the counselors, a fight goes on, Otis strikes, or if he crosses paths with a cameo, he just kills them outright. He'll also smash through locks. He smashes through at least, I think, 1 lock during his path, or during his turn. And that is really the game. You're working cooperatively to get through one of those scenarios and successfully complete it before Otis can kill all of you or force the body count track to get too high and force a showdown, which is definitely not in your favor because at that point he is just brutally difficult. So, and the way the showdown works is you actually have to keep knocking him down level by level and knock him all the way down until he loses all of his attack power. That's how you kill him. So you definitely don't want that to happen because it is super difficult. But one way or the other, you have to survive the night against Otis with you and your counselor friends. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Now, without a doubt, I love the theme of Camp Grizzly. Now, it's not that I like horror movies or slasher movies or anything like that. I just think that the theme comes out really, really well in this game. And it's kind of a parody and kind of an homage. It's halfway between those different things. But it just works really well. And you see lots of aspects of the game that draw that theme out, from the abilities that the counselors have to all the different cards that you draw from the deck, or that, again, are homages to that genre of film, of cinema. And then, of course, the end game scenario cards. I know they have a proper name. I'm just butchering it. But those really are neat because you have multiple different options of which you can go down. And they're all like the cliches of the movie genre, but sort of twisted on their ears to be a little more fun. So like a giant bear fights Otis, or you have to convince a cop to help you out, or he just kills himself and you're on your own. So I like all those little neat thematic bits that the game interjects, and it's really, really helped along by the artwork and the graphic design, which I love. I love the artwork in this game. They could have gone for something just really, really dark and grisly, and I might have still liked it, but I think it was a better choice to go for comic book style art that almost had like an Archie Comics type feel to it. It looks really well done. It gives the game a good vibe. Some of the cards are really brutal. There's like entrails hanging out and stuff like that. But it all fits in with the theme very, very well, and I really appreciated that. Now, going on to the gameplay. A lot of this ties in with the theme, so I might be repeating myself a bit, but I really like the fact that all the counselors have different special abilities. They all tend towards the flavor of that character. Like, one of the two jock-type characters can run really fast, and one of the characters can scream and draw Otis to her, and one of the characters is the survivalist, like the nature girl, and she won't get lost in the woods. These are all those different stereotypes of characters that you find in these types of movies, and I like that the game gave you special abilities to make you feel distinct from the other characters and to make you feel like you're doing something the others can't do. I like that in any game, really. A lot of the cards that you have to use in the game, and some that are just inflicted on you, are also nice bits of theme and add to the fun of the gameplay as well, like having to interact with the different cameos, which can be very frustrating, but still, that's part of the game. Having to take care of the campers, like weighing you down most of the time, although some of them are useful. These are all really nice bits to the game. Some of it is just standard fare, like find this equipment, equip this equipment, increases my die or gives me another die to roll, things like that. That I've seen in a number of different games, not really innovative or groundbreaking. Having said all of this, and it sounds like I'm very, very positive about the game. In those parts of the game, I am very positive. But ultimately, where the game stumbles very, very heavily is in its core gameplay, which boils down to move, draw a card, see what happens, probably roll some dice when Otis strikes, and that's that. And hope that it all works out for you. I do like the fact that Otis is stalking you. That, again, that adds to the theme of the game, him constantly moving around, never leaving you alone. But constantly, over and over and over again, you're going to be fighting Otis, and it's always going to come down to who can roll highest. Do you happen to have some decent equipment? He breaks ties, so it doesn't really matter most of the time. And you just need to run around, get some items, and get to one of those exit points as quickly as possible. The gameplay is incredibly simple to a fault. Draw a card, see what happens, you have no control over it from the cabin deck, and hope that you roll high enough. That is it. Even when you get to those end game scenarios, which again are really, really cool and thematic to the game, it comes down to die rolls. Even like the bear fight, which is like, yeah, bear fight, that's awesome. Well, discard some cards, give them some good dice, and roll off and hope that you roll higher. That's all that it comes down to. And that's all the entire game comes down to. It is incredibly random. It is incredibly luck-based and very, very just simple. That's the best word I can come up with to describe it. Now, I think that a lot of that is intentional. The game is supposed to be accessible to people who would be casual gamers, who might like these kind of horror films, but maybe aren't into board gaming, and I can appreciate that to a degree. But for me personally, it's very tough to have played so many other different types of cooperative games up to this point, and seeing how they may not be that complicated, games like Pandemic and such, but they have at least something there that makes them deterministic, that makes them, there's strategy involved in the game. I never felt like there was strategy in Camp Grizzly at all. It was just like, this is the best thing I can do. Move to here, move away from Otis, and draw a card and hope that it doesn't kill me. And that's really it. So that's a shame to me, because I do love the theme, and I do love the different special powers and all the cards that can come out of the deck and the different end game scenarios. But ultimately, it's not quite a roll and move. This is like a step up from a roll and move, but you have just barely more control than that type of game. If you love this movie genre that is paying homage to, if you can deal with the simplistic gameplay, if you just want to have, and I hate to use this phrase, but a beer and pretzels game to play with your friends who are also into the theme, then yes, I would definitely recommend it. But if you're only like either, okay, the theme is kind of fun, or I'm kind of into it and I'm looking for a good game to play, I wouldn't necessarily be able to recommend this, because there are better options for cooperative games that actually have some strategy involved. That is Camp Grizzly from Ameritrash Games. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention quickly, I mentioned in the beginning of the video that it is mostly cooperative, but kind of semi-cooperative. That's another weird part of the game didn't really sit well with me, because some campers can leave through one of the exits, and if they happen to randomly win, then they win and the other players don't. But if they die, then the other players get a shot at it. But shouldn't you be wanting to pool your resources and work together? I guess that's another bit of theme to the game, where people in the movie can be at odds with each other. But it just felt very awkward, and I felt like that's another rough edge of the game that could have been sort of sanded away by having more development and having less randomness in the game. I don't know. That's my 2 cents anyways.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.